The following program is a co-production with EWTN and the Tim and Steph Bush School of Business and Economics of the Catholic University of America.
Welcome to A Force for Good. I'm Jay Richards with the Bush School of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America here in Washington, D.C. In this episode, we talk with a man who started his career as Swiss Guard in the Vatican, then became an entrepreneur, and now teaches undergraduates how to become entrepreneurs themselves. But before that, we bring you the story of a businessman who helped turn around an ailing company and eventually developed one of the largest wine companies in the country by applying virtues that allowed for long-term growth.
I made wine with my grandfather when I was probably about 7, and I'd visit him maybe once a week or two. Every time I'd go to visit him, he'd break out the wine that we made together, and he'd pour a little thimbleful for me and a glass for himself, and we'd toast one another, and very proud of our accomplishment.
Little could anyone have known that Art Ciocca would one day transform a fledgling Franzia company into the largest wine brand in the world.
Some of the best solutions, some of the best ideas we got from people who thought outside the box. It's why we became the most cost-efficient producer in our industry.
Established in 1981, the wine group is the world's second largest wine producer by volume. They've developed a portfolio of over 50 brands of wine that includes Franzia, Cupcake, Chloe, and Concannon. In 2016 alone, they sold over 65 million cases of wine. Art Ciocca is the founder and chairman emeritus of the wine group. Born in 1937, Art grew up in Tarrytown, New York. After attending Holy Cross College, he served as a midshipman in the Navy while pursuing a master's degree.
In graduate school, I kind of learned that my passion was consumer packaged goods marketing. I tried to become an entrepreneur before my time in a venture that failed and left me jobless and penniless. So I took a job at Gallo, and it turned out to be the best growth experience of my life. Ernest Gallo was an incredible entrepreneur, incredible businessman, wonderful leader, and I learned a lot from him. At Gallo, I learned how to think like an entrepreneur, even though I never was one. I was hired by Coke New York in 1974 as vice president marketing, and my mandate was to build the Franzia brand. But when I got aboard, what I didn't know is the company was headed for all kinds of trouble. And Coke New York decided to sell the business. And they did it without telling me. I got on the phone, I called New York, I said, listen, if you want to sell this company, it's your prerogative, but involve me in the process so I can help you with it. They said, okay, come on back. So I got on a midnight flight to New York, and one of the directors, who I really didn't like very much anyhow, said this is a crummy company and we ought to sell it and take our licks. I don't know where this came from, but because I hadn't rehearsed it, it wasn't premeditated in any way, I said, this is a darn good company, and if you don't want it, I'll buy it. Well, 6 months later, we were the proud owners of the wine group. Although it took a lot of work and 6 months worth of agony to make this happen, we got it done. I think we were leveraged 26 to 1. It's the best thing that we ever did in retrospect.
Shortly after the purchase of the Franzia business, Art's life took a dramatic personal turn.
30 days after we completed the leverage buyout, I was introduced to the girl whose grandmother founded the winery that I had just purchased. Her name was Carly Franzia. We were married less than 6 months after that. But it's an amazing story because her grandfather, Giuseppe, immigrated here from Italy, probably around the turn of the century. He worked very hard and finally became a successful grape grower and vineyard owner. At that point, he sent away to his local hometown for a wife. Her name was Teresa.
In 1898, she immigrated all the way to the United States, all the way around the Horn, and actually I understand she came through Angel Island, which is right here, and got off the boat and met this man, and they got married and proceeded to have 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls. And my grandfather, like all Italian immigrants coming here, many to the Central Valley, loved farming, so he had grapes and cherries, and farming was his life.
The Franzia family had been selling grapes to mostly immigrant families in New York and Chicago. It was a good business at first, but as time went on, especially in Chicago, the Capone mob began to extort the farmers by delaying the delivery of the perishable grapes. It sometimes led to great financial loss.
So in 1933, Prohibition's lifted. What are we going to do with all these grapes? So my grandmother said, well, let's go into the wine business. Off she goes, horse and buggies to San Francisco to meet her good friend, A.P. Giannini, who was the founder of Bank of Italy at the time. She said, I want to leverage all of Giuseppe's ranches, and I want to borrow $10,000. And my grandfather was in Italy visiting family at the time, and that's what she did, without asking my grandfather's permission or letting him know. So he gave her the money, and she took $5,000 of that and started the Franzia winery with her sons, and she gave the other $5,000 to my aunt and my uncle, Ernest, to start the Gallo winery. My grandfather came back from Italy, and he just about had a heart attack and couldn't believe it, and off and running they were in the wine business.
That $10,000 was the seed money for what is now more than 50% of the wine industry in the United States today. So I consider Teresa Franzia to be the first real female entrepreneur in America.
One of the reasons for the great success of the Franzia Wine Company was that it introduced a disruptive innovation. It began as a less expensive alternative to bottled wine.
Let me tell you the Franzia Wine Tap story. It is a story about disruptive innovation. Our winery was built for scale and volume, and it was built to basically make 4-liter glass jugs. We were reasonably competitive when we were part of New York because we had a corporate discount that enabled us to buy glass at reasonably competitive prices. But our 2 major competitors were backward integrated into their own glass facility, and as a result, they had a huge cost advantage. Our facility was such that if we didn't have high volume, or if our volume shrunk, our unit costs would go up because we had this big fixed overhead to absorb. We were faced with either changing the paradigm or perishing. We discovered this bag-in-box concept in Australia, and when we envisioned revising that to fit our needs, we saw a very bright future. First we made a 4-liter box, and then we made a 5-liter box. That gave us a huge advantage because our competition couldn't make glass bigger than 4 liters. One of our problems was our competitors outperformed us in the stores. They moved us around and subordinated our products. We made this product so big and so wide and so dramatic that they couldn't subordinate it. It was a huge, huge advantage. In addition to shelf dominance, it was less expensive to make, and we could pass that savings along to consumers. But there were a lot of consumer conveniences to this package that really made it a winner. It was lighter, easier to store, easier to pour, and most importantly, it kept the wine fresher longer. Although there were huge advantages, there were 2 major disadvantages. At first, we couldn't learn how to manufacture this without having leakers. It took us really about 2 years to solve that problem. We knew we had a better concept, but it was a tough sell to consumers. I mean, it was just socially unacceptable to drink wine out of a cardboard box and a plastic bag. The big breakthrough for us came when we basically almost bet the business by investing in national television advertising, and the brand was off and running.
Is that a box of wine?
Well, not just any box of wine. It's Francie.
Within about 4 years, it was the #1 wine brand in the world, which it still is today.
Yeah, it's classy.
I think there are 4 keys to running a successful business. One is having a clear-cut vision of what it is you want to do. Secondly is having the right strategy. Thirdly, and very importantly, is hiring the right people. And by that I mean people who are not only talented, but have the right values. And then the final and most important job is to create a culture of excellence.
The wine company did not just introduce a new way to store and transport wine in the American market. It established a culture of excellence that shaped the most mundane elements of its day-to-day operations.
Our cultural values were the overriding reason for our success. Developing and instilling cultural values was the most important part of my job, and I spent a lot of time doing it. For me, principled entrepreneurship is creating long-term, real, sustainable value for society, starting with the consumers who bought our wines, followed by our employees and our customers, the middlemen through whom we sold our products, and then lastly, stockholders. And we never put stockholders first. We never made short-term decisions unless they were building for the long term. Unfortunately, a lot of people today are content to succeed without any value. Instead of creating wealth, they redistribute it to themselves. And that's not a win-win situation. That's a win-lose situation. And society suffers when that happens, especially the poor.
Art has not been involved in active management of the wine group for the past 15 years. He now spends much of his time in philanthropy and education, sharing what he has experienced over his long and prosperous career.
I can't imagine that he doesn't miss it, but he's taken all that energy and parlayed it into the entrepreneurial, principled entrepreneurialism and really helping young entrepreneurs make a mark, a successful mark, and not just a financial part of it, but in the value system part of it, which I think is really important.
In 2016, the Arthur and Carlise Ciocca Foundation made a generous gift to the Bush School of Business and Economics at the Catholic University of America. The grant established the Ciocca Center for Principled Entrepreneurship. The center helps current and future business leaders develop the virtues they need to launch new enterprises that create real value.
I first got attracted to Catholic Business School from an article in the Wall Street Journal by Tim Bush called Selling Capitalism to Catholics. But I think the thing that persuaded me the most is that the business school was new, the people were new, they were lean, mean, and hungry to make this a success by aligning the things that the business school did with Catholic social doctrine.
This is a man who worked hard and has given the last 20 years of his life to giving back. And for him and through our foundation, it's about education and it's about principled entrepreneurialism. He's really a role model in that world.
Art Ciocca is one of many great stories of successful entrepreneurs. To help us think about what it means to be an entrepreneur, Andreas Widmer joins us here in the studio. As it happens, Andreas is the director of the Art Ciocca Center for Principled Entrepreneurship at the Catholic University of America, and he's also president of the Carpenters Fund. Andreas, thanks for joining me. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me, Jay. It's
Yeah.
always a pleasure.
Well, so everybody hears this word entrepreneur, but what is an entrepreneur specifically? And how does an entrepreneur differ from just an ordinary person that's in business?
There are a million definitions of entrepreneur, and I think the simpler, the better. So to me, an entrepreneur is somebody who sees an additional color, let's say. So everybody looks at the world and they see patterns and don't see patterns, depending on what their color recognition is, say. I think entrepreneurs see additional colors. They see opportunities, they see realities where other people don't, and then they pursue them. That's the essence of an entrepreneur, that they see something, they see an opportunity, they perceive it, and then have the wherewithal to pursue it. They're, in a sense, visionaries and initiators.
So when I think of great entrepreneurs, and everybody has their favorite one,
Yeah.
you know, maybe Thomas Edison, maybe the late Steve Jobs, you tend to think, okay, there's something special about this person. It's like they were wired from birth to be an entrepreneur. Do
Yeah.
you think that's right?
Yes, I do. There are two distinctions with entrepreneurs. One is an inventor, and one is an entrepreneur. I make the distinction. An innovator, an inventor like Thomas Edison,
Right.
is not always the person who knows how to build the company afterwards and actually approach it commercially. So the entrepreneur is, to me, the person who brings this commercially, makes it commercially viable. So that's more like a Steve Jobs or somebody like that.
Well, so, I mean, you run the entrepreneurship program at the business school at Catholic U. So I assume you also think it's possible to teach entrepreneurship, or at least to help students figure out how this works.
You teach entrepreneurship like you teach music or the piano, let's say. That I can't teach you rhythm, but once you have rhythm, I can teach you how to play the piano. So I think there's a underlying gift that somebody has for this kind of vision and perception. I can help you to perfect that, to get much better at it.
So it's like physics, right? You can teach physics, but of course some people are uniquely gifted to be great physics geniuses.
Yeah.
Well, so like if students, or if you were a parent, someone like me that is about to have a child go off to college, how would you tell if you had a child that say, okay, maybe she's not going to be a philosopher, but maybe she'd be an entrepreneur? What should they look for?
Well, what we do at CUA, what I do with the freshmen when they come in, is start a business with them. And then you find very quickly whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And I make you have the idea, and I make you create the plan, and I make you implement it and bring it to fruition. And then that satiates that appetite, and many students come out of this and say, no, that's not me. And other people, other students like find themselves and totally flourish in it. That's what college is all about, isn't it?
It is. So it sounds like it's, having talked to some of these students, it's a bit of a trial by fire, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something entrepreneurship is such a popular topic and everything that people say, well, am I or am I not? Well, give me one semester and you'll know.
So what do you think accounts for the fact that business people, including entrepreneurs, among people in the church, faithful Catholics, they often have a bad reputation, What do you think accounts for that?
To some extent, the media and the culture of news that focuses on bad news right away. And you hear all the horrible things that happen where somebody abuses authority in business, you hear that right away. It also, of course, makes for great movies. I just recently watched the Lego movie with my son, and Lord Business.
Perfect. It's perfect, yeah.
It's actually an abuse of government power, but they call him Lord Business.
Exactly.
Just to make it.
But notice Lord Business, so both the political reality and the business reality are united in one guy.
And so that's just like it comes, just like with Scrooge and everything. The narrative of these stories and the narrative of the media, to a large extent, is just very suspicious of business. And I think that comes from the idea that we just focus on the negative consequences, and the people who do this negatively a lot. Yet, I mean, how many businesses are there in the United States?
Right.
And you and I wouldn't have had breakfast or lunch or dinner today if it wasn't for these business people. So they're doing such tremendous good, but that's not what we focus on.
That's right. I mean, well, as a Catholic, how do you think we ought to think of this role of entrepreneurs in our society? Is there a way to sort of understand this theologically?
I think that entrepreneurs, in a very unique sense, reflect the creative power of God. I'm, of course, a follower of John Paul's theology, and what he talks about when he looks at business and at work in general, but business in particular, is that we have this ability to participate in God's creative power. When God created the world, God says, well, wouldn't it be nice to have the world and the universe? And he started to create this, and the first thing we really know about God is that God is an entrepreneur. He has an idea and then he implements it, right? That's exactly what we do in business. So in a deep sense, when we do this, we are invited by God into participating in his creative power. That's at the core what entrepreneurship, business, work is all about.
Wow, that's a fundamentally different view than Lord Business or Scrooge or any of these sorts of things.
And a lot of people then talk about, and I think there's a Catholic distinction, then people talk about, well, the number one goal of a business is profit. Well, I agree that profit is very important. God has never created anything that doesn't produce profit, that flourishes.
Yes.
Because love has a innate tendency to overflow, right? God can't help but to overflow. And so when we imitate God, we can't help either to overflow. However, that is not the first and foremost objective of a business. The first and foremost objective for a business from the Catholic point of view is creativity, to create, because when we create, we imitate God. That's the there's a first objective of a business.
And this is, of course, this is the first command that God gives to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, that he connects actually our fruitfulness as parents, but also our fruitfulness in subduing and transforming the earth for good purposes, of course.
As stewards, and that comes in. There are things, there are these competing ideas of everything has to be productive, everything has to be turned into an economic means and everything.
Right.
And that's not what God meant. There are some things that are priceless.
Yes.
There are some things that have no price on it, and there's some things that you don't involve in economics and the economy and so on.
Yeah.
And that's, again, a perspective. Francis really brings this out lately with Laudato Si and so on, that we are the stewards of creation. And that means we have to have the prudence and the wisdom to know where to apply economics and business and innovation and everything and where not.
It's really good stuff. I know we'll probably have you again.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Jay.
You bet. Everyone knows the stereotype of the greedy business person. But is greed really good for business? We've all heard it 1,000 times. Business is all about money and greed. Just think of almost any business person you see in the movies. There's almost always a greedy character. There's Ebenezer Scrooge in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. There's that money-grubbing Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life. There's even that iconic tuxedo-clad banker from the game of Monopoly. His name, by the way, is Uncle Pennybags. As Christians, we know that greed's not good. On the contrary, it's one of the 7 deadly sins. Why is it deadly? It's deadly because it leads, in the end, to idolatry. When we're greedy, our possessions, our material wealth, take the place of God. But there's only one true God. That's why Jesus told his disciples that no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. If business really were all about miserliness and serving money, that would be a big problem. It would mean that faithful Catholics could only enter business by endangering their souls. But is it true? The question isn't whether there are greedy people in business. Of course there are. You can find greedy people in every profession. Greedy doctors, greedy professors, maybe even greedy priests. It's easy to think of some selfish business person or company that bilks retired widows out of their life savings. But we often hear about them when they're going bankrupt or being charged with a crime. It doesn't sound like a great business plan. Here's a better question. Is greed good for business? That is, do you need to be selfish to succeed in business? The answer to that is an obvious no. Think about the real businesses you encounter every day. Your grocery store, your barber, your dentist, your favorite restaurant or clothing store. You have a choice where you buy your meat, your vegetables, your socks, and your t-shirts. So why do you do business with them? It's because they provide you with something you want, and you want it enough to pay for it at the offered price. Your local grocer can't make you buy his bananas. He has to go out of his way to appeal to you. The late management guru Peter Drucker said that the purpose of business is to create and keep a customer. In a market economy, you can't succeed in business long term without customers. It's hard to get and to keep customers if they think you're selfish and trying to rip them off. In other words, the best way to succeed